So what I'm going to do is kind of follow along with this little Razor Pages tutorial. And instead of doing the movie database, I'm going to do a database that basically stores professional development sites, okay, such as this one. So to create this, I'm going to create a new project. And the project is an ASP.NET Core web app. And I'm going to call it PD for professional development, master detail. And I'm just going to keep that on .NET 5, very similar to .NET Core 3. And at this time, I'm not going to do authentication because it does make it much more complicated. We're trying to keep this simple. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. And so it's basically created kind of a skeleton of a project for me. There are some default Razor pages in here already. The www root folder is where the CSS JavaScript libraries are, also where the Bootstrap library is located. Then we have the startup file. And this is where we add dependency injection. So we will be using this. And this is also where we have something called the middleware pipeline, where it is telling it to use routing, which is URL information, use authorization if we add that in. And it's also kind of specifying that what the endpoint is when we are accessing our application. So this is called the middleware pipeline. Program CS, that is where your main module is located. App settings is a JSON file that will have some connection information added to it when we have the database information generated, which is something that's nice about Razor Pages is a lot of the code for the database is generated. MVC, you have to type a lot of it in. So it's a little easier in Razor Pages. So the first step in this project is to create a model folder and then to add the class that basically represents your table that you want created. Okay, so we are going to right click on our project. We're going to add a new folder and we're going to call it models. And inside models, this is where you're going to add your class. And this is going to be typically whatever you call the class is what your database table is going to be named. So I think I'm just going to call it resources, right? Because I'm doing this on professional development resources. And then just because I'm kind of a lazy typist, I'm going to copy data annotations because I'm probably going to want to add a couple of those. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this part and then change it. So these are all going to represent columns in the table. So ID is the primary key. and Razor Pages will make it an identity column automatically. So I'm going to leave that alone. And then I'm going to keep title because I am going to want the title of the site. And then I think I'm also going to want, instead of genre, I'm going to want the type of resource that I am looking at. Because it could be a book, could be an article, it could just be a blog. So I'm going to put type in here. And I'm also going to do price because there are resources you can pay for and resources that are free. I will set a default value of 0 though. And I think I also want description in here. And so that's going to be a string description. And that will allow them to kind of describe what's at the site and actually add a URL if they want to. And I think I'm going to include date, but I'm going to move price up. We'll do, trying to decide the order that I want these in. Maybe I'll do date up top. And so this is going to be not release date. It's going to be, I'm just going to say date, right? This is the date that it was added or reviewed. So I'm just going to keep it on date. And I think that's all I really want to store. So I'm just trying to keep it very, very simple. Now, as far as business logic goes, you can add annotations to this and kind of control some of the information that is put in here when they're entering data. So for example, let's say for the type of site, I only want to allow alphabetic characters. And let's say I want that to be required. Then I can actually add a regular expression above this. And I can add a required attribute as well. So I'm going to pause this a second. Let's say I also want to limit the length of data that they type in there. I can specify a string length. And so let's say 30 is what I want the length to be. So all of these data annotations go with what is right below them, which is type. Now, if there's anything else that I want required, I can just kind of copy required. And so what'll happen when I generate the database in the table is those columns will be labeled not null. And I don't really need to worry about that on the key because that's going to happen anyway. Let's see. Price is going to have a default of 0. Could be that there's not a title. So I think I'm going to make description required. And that's it for required. For the date, I would like that to be formatted a little bit. And so I'm going to put that right in here. So when I'm formatting this, I've got data type set to date. So the system knows it's a date. And then for the display format, that's going to affect how it looks in the forms. So I want it to display as month/day/century year. And I want that format in edit mode as well. So it doesn't matter if I'm on a detail screen or if I'm on an edit screen, I'll see that date format. For the title, I think I am going to have a string length applied to that. But we'll let that be a little bit longer. Ooh, I should have author in here too, right? And so for the author, string length of 30 is fine. And I'm not going to make it required because some sites don't have an author. Oh, let's see. What else do I want here? For the price, I do want to do something here. I'm going to pause a second. All right, so for the price, the number range can be between 1 and 1,000, although I would never want to pay $1,000 for professional development. But there are conferences that the price of the conference can be, up to 1,000. So I think that's reasonable if you were going to do PD at a conference. The data type I set to currency, and then you'll notice that I want to influence the type of column that will be created in the database itself. So I would like it to be decimal, 18, and 2. So you'll notice that that has the red squiggle because that is affecting the schema. So I need a little different using statement there. I have to pull in the schema. So if I go into show potential fixes, here is what I need, and that'll add it for me. Now let's see. So for my type, I might modify string length a little. So I have the length set to 30, but let me do a minimum length on this. Equal to 3, right? Web could be an option, but really it should not be smaller than 3. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go ahead and run a build. Okay, and at this point, I am going to be ready to do some scaffolding. So down in Pages, I'm going to add a folder with my name. And you will need everybody in your team to have their own folder. And it's just the same exact procedure. You're just going to right click, add, and then new folder. Once you have your folder, You're going to right click, add, and you're going to choose new scaffolded item. Razor pages, and then you want Razor pages using Entity Framework CRUD. Click on add. And for the model class, this is the class that you just created. And then for your data context, if you click on that, it'll just kind of generate it for you. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a data folder, and in the data folder, it will put a data context file that Entity Framework uses to determine how many tables you need and what it should name the tables. So let's click on add. And this can take a few minutes, so I'm going to pause. Okay, so I've got my folder. It created the data folder and the context file. The context file is derived from DB context. And basically it is saying that we're going to use our resource model to create a resources table, and that'll be in our database. So once you have one teammates in here, then the other teammates will be able to add theirs. It will use the same context and the same model. So basically you just add a folder. We'll do one for Jane Doe. Same procedure. Add new scaffolded item. And here it's filling this in because we generated that before. And you click on add. And this probably won't take as long as the first one because it doesn't have to do as much. So each teammate is going to need this. So I'll just do one more. And this is for John Doe. Add. So at this point, I can run a build. I can actually run this, but the menu does not include pathways to any of the team folders. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to fix that. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And where that is coming from is layout. So layout has the navigation system in it. It's in the header section. And then each view that is displayed, and by default, the views down here, the index and the privacy, are the ones that you see when you first run it. Those are pulled into render body. So all of the views that you have will also be pulled into render body. And what we need to do is we need to add some routing to this so that in the menu, we can have it go to your folder and your page. So to do that, I'm basically just going to copy the home one. And I'm going to add Lisa/index, and that will take me to this index page. Now, if you'd named your page, if you renamed it and called it something else, that's fine. But I'm just going to leave mine at index. And then I can do basically the same exact thing for John and Jane. But I don't really like this light background, so I'm going to change it. So all of this class stuff is Bootstrap 4. And so you can see it's got navbar light. I'm going to change that to dark. And let's see, background white. I'm going to change it to dark. Now, when I do that, I have to remember to come down here and change the color of the items that are in the menu, because right now it's got text dark. Well, if you have it at text dark, you're not going to be able to see it if you change the background to dark. So you're going to have to change it to text light or some other Bootstrap class that has light text. And I'm going to go ahead and copy. And so this is John. And now we have Jane. I will just say Lisa's resource. I'll just say, maybe I'll just say master resource master. This is what's going to display on the menu. That may be too wordy. All right, so let me save this. Run a little build. And then let me run it. Okay, so Bootstrap is responsive, as you can see. And this is kind of wordy, so I might change it. But at this point, everybody's looks the exact same, and there is no data. So I am going to get an error because I have no database and no data. Okay, the home works, privacy works, but these are not going to work because we don't have them connected to anything yet. And I can see I don't really like this. I'm going to change this. And maybe that. I have it say professional development resources. And I can probably just do this and it makes sense. All right, so we'll save this. All right, so in order to test this, I do need to create the databases. And it would also be nice to have data, kind of pre-populate. So I want to seed the databases. So in order for us to do that, we are going to have to create them. So let me go into the Package Manager console. So the first thing you have to do is add a migration. And what that is going to do is basically generate some instructions for Entity Framework to tell it how to create the database table. So it's add migration. And then normally your first one is something like initial create, right? It's the first one that you're doing. Now, when you do that, it creates a migration folder with an initial create file. In that initial create file that it automatically opens, you can actually see the code that is going to create your table. So the name of the table is resources. These are the columns. You can see that ID is automatically going to be an identity column. And then you can actually see the settings that we specified with max length and that type of thing. Okay, and you can see that this is the decimal 18.2 because we specified that. Okay, so once we have run add migration, then to actually create the database, to execute this code, what you need to do in the Package Manager console is key in update-database. Now, at this point, there's nothing in our database, but if we run this, it's not going to bomb. So we can actually run it. Okay, and I can select mine. Okay, and I can see how it looks. I could actually add something here as well. Okay, and at this point, everybody's looks the same. And I can see I have an extra apostrophe that I don't like that I need to fix. So I'm going to exit out of there. So our next step, we want to get some kind of seed data. So let's see, we are going to add that to our models. And we're just going to call it seed data. So it is probably a good idea to just double check and make sure that the code it was supposed to generate was generated correctly. So in the startup, once we did the migration, you can see in configure services, this is the dependency injection that it's got our DB context that it added. Okay, and that was done correctly. Everything else is pretty much the same as it was before. App settings .json, what you're going to notice is it's added a connection string to this. And this is for our context, which is going to be our database in the table, where it's got database equal. This is what the name of our database is going to be. So if you don't like that name, you can certainly change it. Okay, so those things were automatically generated for us. And if you wanted to take a look at the database and the empty table, you can, but I'm going to actually do the seed data first, and then we'll take a look at it because there's going to be some data in there, and that tends to be a little bit more interesting. So for the seed data, we are going to right-click on models, and we are going to add a class that we are going to call seed data. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to adjust it because what I'm going to do is kind of similar. Now, if you're going to do this, you do need to be a little careful about the curly braces. So obviously this seed data is going to be different than mine because I'm not doing movies, right? But just looking at this, the top line is fine. So my context file is PD master detail. And so I also need that down here. And my class is not movie, right? I'm calling it resources. That's not my class, and that's also the name of my table. So I'm going to replace that. Okay, and so I don't need ID. That I do not need to worry about. Title of the resource. Customize this. W3 schools. Let's see. Let me find a couple different sources here. We'll do W3 schools SQL tutorial. And then I don't have release date. I do have a date. And let's see. Then I have a type. It's a web tutorial. Price, 0. And I think I had a description in here. There's the URL. Now I could have a separate URL column, but I just decided to keep it in the description because not everything is going to have a URL. Oops, I think I just need a 0 here. All right, did I get everything from my class? IDs generated. I've got date, title. Oh, the author. Okay. Type, description, price. Okay, so I have author too. Okay. So that's one resource. And just going to copy this. HTML5. There it is. It's actually HTML, so I'll change that. Make my description more generic. So all of that is the same. I'm going to pause a second while I get the rest of these in here. All right, so I've added some resources here, and you'll notice that I have a little error, and that's because I'm not pulling in my data. So if I go to show potential fix, it tells me what I need to add. And let's see what else I need to add in the framework. And now I have everything. So I'm going to go ahead and run a build. And that did succeed. And then in Program CS, let's take a look at that. So I've got the beginning part. Create host filter. But I am missing all of this. Yeah, so I want to get rid of the dot run here. Actually, that should go down here. And I need to add all of this in there. And this is going to run that seed data for me. All right. Services. And I am probably missing some things up here. I am missing my models. So I've got hosting. I don't think I have dependency injection, and I'm lazy, so I'm going to copy it. And let's see. All right, so moving on down. I need my semicolon there. Ah, I forgot. Need a host variable set to that. All right. All right, so here is where it's pulling in our seed data. And if for some reason that doesn't work, it's going to log the error, and then we have it running down here. All right. So that should work. Let's go ahead and run a build. So basically all of this is added to run our seed data. That's all we're doing. So now that we have added that, we can go ahead and run this and we should see our seed data. Assuming that I typed it in right. Okay. There's my details. So that doesn't look too bad. And at this point, I could add to this. And I can see I don't like those extra little apostrophes, which I left in here. So at this point, I'm ready to do a little customizing for my index. I don't have to show all this on my master page, which is basically what the index is. I do think all of it's useful except for price, because most of the time the price is free. So I'm going to get rid of that. And let's see, I may do a little bit of styling to this because it is boring. So I added a little bit of styling to this, and I do think it looks better. So this is what it looks like now, and the others are what it looked like before. And you can see that I did add a little change to the link colors. So I will show you where that took place. All I did in the site CSS is add some active and link active, visited, and hover settings. And then I did make some changes in here in my index as well. I did some background colors and rows. I thought there was too much in a single row for the details, so I split it into 2 rows. And I did add a little styling down here in the layout. I also removed the price from the master just because I didn't feel like it needed to be there. The detail, I would leave everything in. And just adjust some of the text here. So how these work is they are connected to the model, directly connected to the model. So where it says display name 4, it's pulling the name from the model. And so it's actually pulling the property name unless we have specified a different display name. Okay, if you've specified a different display name, then it will pull that instead. Okay, so it's directly connected to this, and you can actually adjust these annotations at any time that you want. And you do not need to redo migrations when you do that. And let's see. Where it says display 4, okay, this is actually pulling the data from the table. So display name 4 is grabbing the name from your model. Display 4 is the data that's in your table. And really for the edit, I don't think I'm going to change much. This is displaying the link, the back to the list, and the edit link. So I'm going to pretty much leave those alone. I just changed some of the text. And I'm going to save everything. I'm going to reload it. And there's my details. So at this point, the only thing I'm really missing is the ability to sort and filter, which I will be adding to this in the next video.